everybody, welcome back to homerecordingmadeeasy.com and here on my YouTube channel. And this time out, we're going to do a walkthrough now of our Behringer X-Touch DAW control surface. If you did not see the unboxing video, make sure you click the link in the description box where we unbox this and we talk about this and talk about what we're going to be doing over the next several videos with the Behringer X-Touch. So we're going to walk through it today. I'm going to show you some of the features and functions of it, and then in follow-up videos, we'll get a little bit deeper into certain sections of the Behringer X-Touch. So before we get started, make sure you like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Also, if this is your first time here and we're talking about mixing, you want to get a little mixer, a little surface controller, go out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com because I want to give you a free mixing course. It is right on the homepage. Click that orange button. It's a $100 course. No strings attached. It's my gift to you just for visiting Home Recording Made Easy. And if you stick around to the end of the video, we will give you something else for free. So stick around. So here we are in Studio One. Now I'm using this with Studio One because that's the primary DAW that I use. Some of these features and function buttons will react a little differently depending on the DAW that you're using. This thing is made to work with all the major DAWs, and I'm sure it does. If you want to see this working with different DAWs, you can search YouTube. I'm sure there's a billion videos out there showing you how to do that. Now, before we get started, a couple things I want to make sure I tell you right up front. Number one, this was given to me by Sweetwater and Behringer, my good friends over at Sweetwater, because you guys asked for me to do a review on this because I've been doing 18 months worth of DAW control surfaces, everybody from soft tube to PreSonus to Icon QCon Pro X to SSL. I think that might be it. And then you guys asked me to do the Behringer X-Touch. So I called up Sweetwater and said, hey, my audience wants me to do this. Finish out our whole series of DAW controllers. Can you send me one? And they were very gracious to do that. So the video is sponsored in that. Sweetwater sent me this, but they don't pay me for the video. They don't tell me what to say, blah, blah, blah. You know the speech if you've been watching YouTube for a while. So thank you, Sweetwater. Thank you, Behringer, for this. Now, in the unboxing video, you also saw that not only did I have the X-Touch here, the main unit with all the transport in the master section, but we also have an 8-bank extender unit, which we're going to do in another video. For this video, I thought it was important just to focus on this because this is the meat and potatoes. We'll do another video where we put two of them together and see how they work together. So have no fear. So let's see, that's it. Okay, last thing before we walk through. The way I do these videos is real simple. I break it out of the box, I plug it in, make sure it turns on. Turn on the camera, we start working on it. Why? Because I don't want to work with this thing for 3 or 4 months and then as I become an expert at it, show you every nook and cranny that goes on with these controllers. You have a million YouTube videos that can do that. What I'm trying to provide for you is, if you purchase this from Sweetwater, links will be in the description box below. Yes, there are affiliate links. And you get this home for the first time and you crack open the box. How quickly can you get set up and how quickly can you figure this out without having to watch 2,000 YouTube videos and break open the user manual? That's what these are. Can we get up and running quickly? And then we can dive deeper in other videos. So I've had, I don't know, 10 minutes worth of experience with this before turning on the camera. Okay, so that's what makes these reviews a little bit unique in that I'm trying to help you. You first get it. Can you get up and running with no fuss and no muss? So here we are. Let's talk about this. So let's start at the top left-hand corner and we'll work our way through this thing the best we can. Okay, along the top, we have our 8 faders here and our 9th fader here is our master. So along the top, the very first thing we have is our encoder here. Depending on what you assign the encoder to with these encoder assign buttons, which we're going to talk about in a few minutes, will depend on how this encoder behaves. Pretty standard with all the controllers that are out there. It's made out of plastic. Right now we're on the pan surround, so you'll see on track 1 as we select track 1, it's controlling the panning. It's either a turn or it is a push. Push will bring it right back to the center, or we could turn it far left, push. I will say the quality of these knobs are a little bit to be desired. They're kind of cheap. They feel cheap. There's some slop in them. They're not the highest quality things in the world. When you compare it to something like the PreSonus fader port, which are metal, and even on like the UF8 by SSL, it's a better quality plastic. However, it does work. Is it going to break on you? Probably not. As long as you're not an animal with it and you treat it with, gently, it's going to be fine, but it does feel kind of cheap. Underneath that, we have our LCD scribble strips. Again, depending on the lighting and the contrast, you may not be able to see all the detail. I apologize up front. But it has the name of the track and it has the value of where our fader is here, which is kind of cool. Underneath that, every channel has a meter here. Let me hit play here so you can see it. So you can see the meter, which is kind of cool. We have a clip light at the top if you happen to be clipping. We have our record. We could turn our record on and off. We have our solo. We have a mute, and then we have a track select. And when we hit our track select, you'll see in Studio One in the console, it does follow the track. Hey, how about that? Again, pretty standard. Every controller does this. Buttons feel good. Nice, satisfying click. Nothing, wrong about that. Underneath that, we have our fader. Nice big fader caps. I like that they're nice and big. Some of the DAW controllers, these things are kind of small, and they try to cram them in a very small space. This is spread out nicely, and it's nice and big. Finger fits perfectly on here. They're plastic. They feel a little cheap, but all the DAW controllers feel that way. No one puts a metal cap on there and has a super duper fader from what I remember. But I will say it's nice and smooth. And if I go in, I like this little test. It reacts perfectly in Studio One. There's no lag at all. It's very, very, very good. In the middle of the strip here, you'll see these two big squares. You may or not be able to see that, but it's a visual cue that if you put your fader between those two squares, well, in Studio One, you're not quite at unity. You're at like plus 0.7 dB, but you're close to unity. This gets you really, really close. And if you line it up just right, you could get a perfect to unity gain if you want to, but it's a nice visual cue here. So again, faders feel really good. That is the same through all 8 sections here. Duplicates 8 times. Now, let's talk about the encoders. We up here at the top right-hand side of the unit here, we have our encoder assign section. Again, when we're on the pan surround, it does just that. The encoder is a pan, and if you click it, it goes back to the center. If we go over to track here, depending on the track that you have selected, and we're going to stay on track 1 here for most of this video, okay, you will have different controls for that particular track. So for example, the first one says bypass all. If I press this, it is going to turn all the inserts on and off, all of them. We have 2 at this particular case. Or if I turn it, it will turn them all on or off. The next one is the monitor button. So if I had an input selection, which is the third one over here, my input, if I turn my input to input 2, now you'll see that if I press this, it turns my monitor on and off, and you may be hearing an echo, but you'll see my voice coming in here on track 2 because I have my microphone plugged into that. But that turns on the monitor on and off. The third encoder, again, chooses the input. Okay, we only have 1 input here for now. The next one is the output. Right now, this track is routed to the drum bus, but I can turn that and route it to anywhere I want. That's cool. And then the last 4 are send, bypass 1, send, bypass 1, send, bypass 2, 3, and 4. We have 1 here. So if I press the encoder, you'll see the send going to the drum verb. We'll bypass it, or I can turn it. So it's a press or a turn, whatever you like. I like when you click it, it gets a nice satisfying click, and you could hear the audible click. So it is pretty good. And it does feel good, even though, like I said, it's a little cheap feeling, but it works, okay? That is when you're on the track button for the encoder assigned section. If you hit pan surround, again, we just talked about that. Whatever track you have selected, it will control the panning. Press it, it goes back to the center. The next one is EQ. If you hit EQ, you would think an EQ would pop up. It does not. Maybe in one other DAW it does, but certainly not in Studio One. What this does is this now lays out our effects across all 8 banks on the channel that is selected. So for example, we are on track 1, the kick-in track. We only have 2 plugins, so we can turn the first plugin on and off with the first encoder. We can turn the second plugin on and off with the second encoder. If we had 5 more or 6 more, we could do that with these other buttons, but we don't. So when you're in the EQ mode, this turns off, powers on and powers off each individual insert up to 8, right? If you're in the track mode, this first encoder does them all globally. Does that make sense? That's what that does. Send. You would think that would control your send, and it does. How about that? So we have this particular track going to a drum verb. If I turn this, it will fix the send level. If I hit, press the button, it puts it at 0 dB, or I can go plus or minus. Really cool. We only have 1 send. Now plugin, you would think that that pops up the plugin on the screen. It does not. I have to, that's one button that I have. Again, I've only been used this for 5 minutes before I turned on the camera. I got to figure out what that does. What it does on the LCD screen or LCD screen is it just gives you the track names, track 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I have to figure out, and we'll do it in a future video, what plugin does. My suspicion is when we program some of our function keys and we do our plugin mapping, that's where that button's going to come into play. But right now it doesn't do anything. And then instrument doesn't do anything in Studio One, INST. I got to assume that what that means. So got a couple of buttons we got to investigate, but all the main stuff, really simple. Track, pan, EQ, send. Easy enough, right? Underneath that, we have something that's really cool. This is something that the only other DAW controller has something this nice and big is the Icon QCon Pro X, and that is the digital readout. And you can change it from bars and beats to SMPTE code, which is really cool. So you can change it from bars and beats to minutes and seconds, which is really nice. And it looks really good. When you hit play, you'll see. I like that. I think all the X-Touches, even the single Behringer X-Touch unit has that. And that is kind of cool. I wish PreSonus had that and SSL has that. They have it, but it's on a tiny little screen. This is beautiful. Looks really, really nice. Okay. This button here next to it, which says name and value, doesn't do anything in Studio One. This one switches between bars, beats, and seconds. Underneath that, we have a bunch of buttons in this gray section here. And this, we have one that says global view, which I'm not really sure what that does. It lights up. But what we have here then is how do we want to see our faders? So if we had MIDI tracks and we don't have any MIDI tracks, this would pop up only the MIDI. Inputs, you'll see the input here on channel 1, right? Audio tracks, brings all your audio tracks. If you had instruments, which we don't, that would do that. Aux tracks, you can see we have a drum verb. This controls our drum verb, which is right over here. If I select over here in Studio One, there we go, drum verb. You can see that, right? Or if I was over here back on track 1, I can just hit the select button and that will bring me over here. That's cool. Buses, there's our drum bus. We have a drum bus, okay? Outputs, the only output we have assigned is our master output. I guess if we had some additional outputs in our I/O going out, sending out to say hardware and stuff, you would see all those outputs here. But this one just controls the master fader because it's the only output that we have. So that's all we need. And then user doesn't do anything. I'm not sure what user does. User looks like it brings us right back to the same thing as audio tracks. My suspicion is maybe you can program that, but maybe in Studio One it doesn't function. I'll have to learn more about that as well and bring it to you in a follow-up video. The one thing I will say I don't like about this is none of these buttons light up when you hit them. So you don't know what you're on. That should be fixed. Those buttons should be backlit just like they are up here at the encoder assign track. That's a misstep, I think. But again, that's what it is. Underneath that, we have our function keys. Now, depending on your DAW, some of these will already be pre-mapped to do certain things. We can also pre-map these to do whatever we want, and we could put a little bit of a little strip of tape here, and we can write in what they are so we don't forget. We'll do that in another video, but let me show you what they do right out of the box in Studio One. Function 1 opens the inputs pane. Number 2 doesn't do anything. 3 opens and closes the console. That's very handy. 4 doesn't do anything. 5 allows you to add an insert. Oops. 6 allows you to route your output. 7 opens up the inspector for that particular track. And what does 8 do? Oh, same thing. Okay. Oh, 7, excuse me, depending on the track that you have selected, 7 will open and close your plugin. The first insert in your plugin chain, which is cool. I don't know how to go to the second one. Like, how do I open and close the second plugin? We could probably map that because F7 and F8 do the exact same thing. So again, we'll do a separate video on how to program your function keys to do things that you want them to do. Some of them are already pre-mapped in Studio One. Every DAW will be a little different, but you can customize this. Another video. Underneath that, we have a few sections here. We have a modify section, and again, I'm not quite sure what the modify section does, so that's something else we're gonna have to follow up in another video. When I hit these buttons, they don't do anything. They don't light up, they don't do anything. Same thing with the function keys. They don't light up either, which is again, a lot like the buttons we just talked about. I think they should be backlit. But again, we'll talk about the modify section in another video. We have our automation section, that's pretty standard. Turns your automation modes on the track that is selected. Trim only works in Pro Tools, touch, and latch. Group, I'm not sure what that does, but that's the automation section. Then we have a utility section for save, cancel, enter, and undo. If I hit save, you'll see it saves in Studio One. So again, it's only a few buttons that we have to do some investigation on, but for the most part, it's pretty straightforward. Underneath that, we have our transport section here. We have, if we add markers, we can add markers and cycle through markers. Nudge, I think, is a Pro Tools function. Cycle turns the loop on and off in Studio One, which it does, which is great. Drop, that lights up. Oh, that has to do with the metronome. Replace, we have our click. Click doesn't do anything here in Studio One. You would think that would be the metronome, but maybe in another DAW it is. Again, we'll do some investigation on that. And in solo, you'd think that would be a global solo. It doesn't do anything in Studio One. Underneath that, we have our transport keys. Now, again, we're on stop. That's why it's lit, but the rest of the keys are black, and you can't really see them in a dimly lit room. Once again, that should be backlit like some of these other keys. Now, the reason why they probably are not is because cost. This thing is, you know, $500 US as of the recording in this video. So some of these things, you know, this is one of the least expensive units on the market. But that would be nice to have that. But again, we hit play. Stop. Fast forward, rewind. We'll move the playhead. Works really well, and it syncs up to the counter, which is cool. The buttons feel really good. Nice, satisfying clicks. They don't feel cheap like the encoders do, but I wish they were backlit. And then down in this section, we have our fader bank, and we can bank over groups of 8, or if we had our extender, it would work on that as well. But as you'll see again, in Studio One, the console does not follow like every other controller. Again, that's my pet peeve, and you guys should know that. Or we can go one channel at a time. And again, it works really well, and you can see the LCD will change the tracks. But again, the console does not follow in Studio One. However, it does follow down here with these keys down here. If we go left to right, we can just walk through our tracks, and you'll see as we get to the end of the console view in Studio One, it does cycle over. Thank goodness, not every controller has that. You can click it one at a time, or you can hold it down. If I'm off screen and I bank, again, the console doesn't advance, which is such an oversight on all these controllers. That's left to right. Up or down, if you're at it'll do the same thing. It'll cycle up and down, okay? If you hit the center button and turn it blue, this will allow us to zoom in on the tracks. Let me close the console here. We can zoom in on the timeline, zoom out on the timeline. We can change the track heights. Those are really, really helpful. This is the same kind of functionality that you would see with the UF8 by SSL, and I really like that, and that's a nice little touch that Behringer has here. Last but certainly not least, we have the jog wheel. Now, I will say the jog wheel feels really good. It's plastic, but it feels really good. It's got a nice, satisfying click. It's like a ratcheted step. It's really nice. It does not feel cheap and chintzy. I don't know why they couldn't make the channel encoders feel this good, but this feels really nice. I like that it's big and that it's very similar to the Icon QCon Pro X. I like this much better than I like this Fader Ports jog wheel or even the SSL's jog wheel. This feels really good. Really good. And then we have a scrub feature, which I don't think works in Studio One. I think that only works at Pro Tools, but I'll have to investigate that. That is the walkthrough of all of this. So as you can see, that with no experience at all, I got 95% of this thing and I know what everything does. And there's a few sections I got to figure out, and we'll bring them into you in later videos. So if you get this out of the box at home, you should be able to plug this in and get to moving pretty quick, and it works pretty well. Overall, I have this, just so you know, I have some foam underneath the front of this thing to angle it up. I don't like the angle that it sits too flat on the desk, but every single controller has that problem with the exception of the UF8 by SSL that has built-in feet that are adjustable. But you can do that. Again, from a build quality point of view, it feels pretty good. It feels cheaper than something like the SSL UF8, but again, this is 1/3 the price. 1/3 the price. Does it feel overall, does it feel like a pretty well-made unit? Yes. Does it feel as good as, let's say, the fader port, which is by PreSonus, which is in the same price bracket? I think the fader port is completely aluminum or metal or whatever they're using around the whole thing. There's no plastic on the sides like this has. I think the fader port is probably a little bit better built than this. But they're really, really close. I will say this is a lot thicker and taller than the fader port. So the fader port's a little bit more slim, a little bit more sleek. Left to right, front to back, they look to be about the same width and depth, but you can check the links in the description box out at Sweetwater and you can check out the actual dimensions, but it's very close. When you toss an extension on here, obviously it takes up more room. One of the advantages that this has that something like the fader port does not have is the fader port does not have 8-bank extenders like we're going to see in another video. You could put 2 fader port 8s together, but then you're doubling up on the transport section and it takes up more real estate. The only other company that does an extender is the Icon QCon, which is beautiful. Oh, and also the Sawtooth Console 1. You can just take their fader units and you can string 4 or 5 of those together. So that's kind of cool. So that's something that this thing has. Overall, pretty good unit. Build quality, okay. Couple of things that need to be fixed, backlit buttons, blah, blah, blah. But for first impressions, pulling it out of the box, it works. It works. And at the price point that it's at, it's something to consider. So I hope you found this video helpful. Again, next video, we'll take a look at how we program our function keys and maybe some of the other things that I was a little unclear on. We'll also break out the extender at one point so we could see 16 channels together and how that all kind of works. And then I'll give you an overall summary video of all the likes and dislikes about the fit function and all of that stuff. So I hope you found this video helpful. Again, like, share, subscribe, leave comments below. Let me know if there's something specific you want to learn about the X-Touch or questions that you have. I'll try to bring them into the next videos for you, or in my summary, likes, dislikes, or Q&A video. We'll do all of that. As I said at the beginning, thanks for watching this entire video. Go out to homerecordingmadeeasy.com, right? Get that free mixing course. Take that course. If you like my style of teaching and you want to learn more from good old Uncle Dave here, I have a whole online school, everything from absolute beginner to intermediate to advanced level, recording, mixing, mastering, the whole kit and caboodle. If you want to take one of my other courses, I want to give you a 25% discount. Use the coupon code YouTube25. That'll take 25% off any training course on my website. And if you want to learn more about mixing, you really want to learn the craft of mixing, you want to join a community of people that are all trying to get better at the craft of mixing, check out mixingmadeeasy.net. Links will be in the description box below. And until the next video where we take a look at some more features and functions of the X-Touch, I've been Dave with homerecordingmadeeasy.com. Thank you so very much for watching me, everybody, and I'll see you guys in the next video.